She had nothing but a kind heart, hands calloused from scrubbing marble floors, and the hope of a better future. She worked as a maid in a mansion so grand it resembled a palace, with imposing columns and crystal chandeliers that shone like stars trapped in the ceiling. For her, each day began before sunrise, weighed down by buckets, rags, and harsh orders, echoing through the hallways. The smell of wax, mixed with the expensive perfume that permeated every curtain, constantly reminded her of a life that would never be hers. But despite it all, there was something about her that set her apart from the other servants, a soul that did not harden, even in the face of the coldness with which she was treated. The mansion's owner, a billionaire accustomed to having whatever he wanted, lived in a world of his own. Surrounded by business, power, and secrets, he rarely looked at those who kept his household running. He had an elegant wife, always impeccable, with dresses that cost more than the maid could earn in years of work. But it was their son, a fragile and curious boy, who most caught the young maid's attention. There was an innocence about him that captivated her, and it was impossible not to become attached. She was the only one who had the patience to listen to his stories, the only one who would stoop to his level to play, the only one who made him genuinely laugh. No one imagined that this simple connection would become the link that would change everyone's destiny, because, in that house, where the hallways hid whispered secrets and suspicious glances, the unexpected was about to happen, and it would be the poor maid who would become the centerpiece of a story of shock, betrayal, and redemption that no one would ever forget. On that particular morning, the day seemed like any other. The billionaire had left early for meetings, his wife was entertaining friends in luxurious cafes, and the maid was following her quiet routine. But the boy seemed restless, asking to play in the garden, insisting on exploring more than he should. The sun illuminated the lush green grass, reflecting off the ornamental fountains, while the sound of birds completed the near-perfect atmosphere. But perfection is an illusion, and in moments, everything would change. As the maid bent down to gather some toys, she noticed the boy had wandered away. Her heart raced. She called out to him, but there was no answer. She ran through the bushes, through the flower beds, until a noise made her freeze, a muffled scream coming from the direction of the artificial lake. Her eyes widened as she saw him struggling in the water, too small to fight the current pulling him toward the deeper end. Without a second thought, she dropped everything and threw herself into the icy water. The sharp sensation nearly paralyzed her, but the sight of the boy sinking made her swim with all her strength. Desperate strokes, shallow breaths, until she finally managed to reach him and pull him up. Time seemed to stand still. She held him against her chest, dragging him to the shore, her muscles burning with exhaustion. When they finally reached the lawn, coughing and gasping, the boy cried, clinging to her. His wet hair stuck to his face, his hands trembled, but the only thing that mattered was that he was alive. She had saved the billionaire's son's life, without thinking of the consequences, without calculating the risks. Just instinct, just love. But what should have been a moment of gratitude turned into something much more complex, because the billionaire, upon being informed of what had happened, didn't react as expected. His eyes showed not just relief, but something deeper, something almost disturbing. There was shock, yes, but also a shadow that was difficult to decipher. He stared at the maid for long seconds, as if he saw in her not only the woman who had saved his son, but also someone who now wielded a power he never imagined bestowing on someone so humble. And it was at that moment that the story took an unexpected turn, because saving the life of a millionaire child wasn't just a heroic act, it was the beginning of a chain of events that would reveal dark secrets, test loyalties, and shock everyone around her. The maid, who had always dreamed only of survival, now found herself at the center of a narrative that would put at stake much more than she could have imagined. Power, hidden truths, and even love. What would that man do next? No one could have predicted, but the answer would come laden with mystery, shock, and revelations that would change everything. And this is where I want you to think with me. If you were that maid, would you have had the courage to jump into that lake without hesitation? If you were the billionaire, how would you react to seeing your son's life saved by someone you always considered invisible? Comment below with your thoughts, because this is just the first part of a story that will keep you hooked until the very last second. If you enjoy stories full of mystery, drama, and surprising revelations, leave a like and subscribe to the channel, Echoes of the Past, because what comes next will shock you. That night, the mansion didn't seem the same. The cold, silent walls carried an invisible weight, as if every painting, every mirror, every imported marble bore witness to something that would change the family's life forever. The boy was sleeping safely after the scare at the lake, but the tension in the air was impossible to ignore. The maid, still trembling, dried her hair with an old towel in the corner of the kitchen, trying to compose herself. Her body ached, her muscles burned, but her heart was at peace. He was alive. Nothing else mattered. At least, that's what she thought. Suddenly, the door burst open. The billionaire walked in. There was no trace of the usual smile he wore for cameras and investors. He wasn't the confident, calculating man who closed million-dollar deals without blinking. He was someone else. His eyes were dark, his jaw clenched, and each step he took toward her echoed like a hammer against the marble floor. He stopped before her, staring intently, as if searching for insight into her soul. The maid's breath caught. For a moment she thought she would be reprimanded for taking the boy into the garden, but instead he said something that confused her even more. "You saved my son." It was just 4 words, spoken in a deep voice, but laden with hidden layers. It wasn't just an acknowledgement, it was an accusation, it was gratitude, it was fear. He had never addressed so many words directly to her. The maid swallowed, lowered her head, and murmured that she had only done what anyone would do, but he didn't seem convinced. "Anyone wouldn't have done it," he replied, pacing in circles, as if trying to organize the thoughts exploding in his mind. "You took a risk. You could have died." The silence that followed was deafening. He then moved even closer, so close that she could smell his expensive perfume mixed with the scent of whiskey. "This changes everything," he said finally. "From now on, nothing will be the same again." The maid didn't understand. Was he grateful or angry? The tone of his voice was indecipherable, his eyes concealing secrets she'd never dared imagine. But her heart sank as she realized that, by saving that child, she'd crossed an invisible line. Now she was on the radar of the most powerful man she'd ever met, and that could mean both protection and danger. The next morning, rumors were already rife throughout the mansion. The other servants whispered in the hallways, "Did you hear? She saved the boy." The boss looked at her strangely. "I wonder if he'll reward her." But behind every comment lay envy, distrust, and even hostility. Some believed she was simply lucky, others suggested it was all a coincidence. No one realized the full extent of what had happened. Meanwhile, the billionaire seemed different. He cancelled meetings, shut himself in his office, and spent long minutes staring at old photographs. When he finally emerged, he called the maid to speak privately. She entered nervously, her hands sweating, her heart racing. The room was imposing. Shelves of rare books, a massive oak desk, heavy curtains blocking the sunlight. The billionaire sat, his fingers drumming on the arm of his chair. "You don't understand what you did," he began. "By saving my son, you messed with something much bigger than you can imagine." She tried to answer, but the words wouldn't come out. "I need you to promise absolute loyalty," he continued. "From now on, you will be involved in matters that must never leave these walls." The confused maid nodded, unsure of what she was getting into, and then he revealed what no one expected. That accident at the lake wasn't an accident. Her legs nearly gave out. The billionaire explained in a low, almost whispering voice that enemies were nearby, that his empire was sustained not only by clean dealings, but by dangerous alliances and buried secrets, and that somehow someone had tried to use the child as a tool of revenge. The maid trembled. What had begun as an act of bravery now felt like the beginning of a nightmare. But he didn't stop there. He stood up, walked over to her, and for the first time touched her shoulder. "You're the only one I trust now." Those words echoed like thunder in her mind. She, a simple maid, invisible for years, now became the centerpiece of an invisible war. The billionaire saw her as a savior, but also as the keeper of secrets that could destroy everything, and the look in his eyes made it clear. It wasn't choice, it was destiny. That night, as she tried to sleep in the small back room, she wept silently. She wanted only to survive, to earn enough to help her distant family, but now she was trapped in a web of power, loyalty, and mystery She hadn't asked to enter. Her heart, however, knew one thing. She couldn't abandon the boy, not after looking into his terrified eyes at the lake. What she didn't know was that from that moment on, every step would be watched, every gesture would have consequences, and every secret revealed would plunge her deeper into a labyrinth from which she might never escape. And I ask you, if you were in her shoes, would you accept this burden? Would you stay in that mansion knowing you now carry secrets that could cost you your life? Leave your opinion in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe to Echoes of the Past, because what's coming next will leave you breathless. The sun had barely risen, and the mansion already seemed heavy with a heavy, almost suffocating silence. The maid woke before everyone else, as usual, but that morning, as she walked through the polished marble corridors, she felt every painting on the walls, every gilded chandelier, and every creaking wooden step seemed to be watching her, as if the invisible eyes of unspoken secrets were stalking her. Never had the mansion seemed so hostile, even after years of cleaning every corner, serving every meal, and swallowing every humiliation disguised as order. The other employees' gazes were different. Some regarded her with contempt, others with venomous curiosity. There were whispers in the air like snakes whispering twisted truths. One cook muttered, "She didn't save the boy. She lured him there on purpose." Another retorted, "Well, you know the boss would never look at someone like her. She's only getting attention because he feels he owes her." That hurt more than any outright insult. As she carried the breakfast tray to the master bedroom, the maid felt her footsteps echo like hammer blows. She was aware that from that day on, everything had changed. When she arrived, she found the billionaire already standing, his tie slightly loosened and his eyes tired from a sleepless night. He didn't touch his coffee. He simply gestured for her to come closer. "Close the door." His voice was firm, but it carried a note of urgency. As the door closed, the billionaire pulled a thick envelope from the drawer and placed it on the table. "I want you to see this," he said, with a gravity that made her shiver. Inside the envelope were photographs, grainy images taken surreptitiously. They showed the boy playing in the garden, getting into the family car, being driven to school. Some also showed the maid herself, walking the halls, serving meals. The sensation was like a chill running down her spine. "This is no coincidence," the billionaire muttered. "Someone is watching every movement inside this house." Her eyes widened, not knowing what to say. "The attempt at the lake wasn't isolated. My son is marked, and somehow you got involved too." The words hung in the air. The maid wanted to flee, to run away from that suffocating reality, but at the same time, something inside her held her back. Perhaps it was her protective instinct toward the boy. Perhaps it was the knowledge that after saving his life she couldn't simply abandon him. The billionaire, noticing the terror on her face, leaned forward. "You're the only person who won't be bought, the only one who has nothing to lose except your own life, and that paradoxically makes you the most valuable person here." Were those words a compliment or a death sentence? She didn't know, but from that moment on it was clear her life was no longer her own. Over the next few days, strange things began to happen. Doors that should have been locked appeared ajar. Anonymous notes appeared under servants' doors with threatening messages. "The truth will come out. No one can protect the boy forever." The mansion's atmosphere became increasingly oppressive, as if marble walls concealed not only luxury but also conspiracies. One night, while carrying clean clothes to the upstairs closets, the maid heard voices coming from the library. She approached quietly and could make out the words. The billionaire was on the phone. "We can't let them know. If they discover the connection between the company and the case, everything will be lost." Her heart raced. What case? What connection? She knew she shouldn't listen, but it was impossible not to be drawn in by the gravity of the words. However, before she could understand more, the sound of footsteps approached. She ran back into the hallway, breathing heavily. She had just crossed another invisible line. The next day, the billionaire called her again. His gaze was darker than ever. "I know you were near the library yesterday." His voice was low, almost a whisper, but filled with menace. "If you want to stay alive, never again approach conversations that don't concern you." The frightened maid apologized, swearing she wouldn't do it again, but something inside her had awakened. the certainty that immense secrets lay hidden behind that facade of wealth and power. The boy, on the other hand, seemed increasingly attached to her. He sought her out in every corner of the house, held her hand and even asked her to accompany him to bed. In his innocent eyes there was gratitude and fear, as if he knew only she could protect him. And then came the biggest shock. One early morning, he awoke to a metallic noise coming from the back hallway. Following the sound, he reached a locked door he'd never noticed before. The noise was coming from inside, as if someone were trying to escape. His heart was pounding, sweat dripping down his palms. As he was about to approach, he heard the sound of firm footsteps behind him. He turned and saw the billionaire standing in the hallway, a look of fury and despair in his eyes. "Go back to your room now," he ordered, his voice as cold as steel. She obeyed, but that night she could hardly sleep. What was in that room? Who was trapped inside? Or what was trying to get out? It was clear. Each new day brought more frightening revelations. And the maid, who only wanted to survive in silence, was now at the center of a web of secrets, lies, and conspiracies. And I ask you, would you have the courage to stay in that mansion, knowing that every corner hid something capable of destroying lives? Or would you flee without looking back, leaving the boy to his own fate? Comment below what you would do. And if you want to find out how far this story can go, subscribe now at Echoes of the Past, because the truth is still far from being revealed. With each dawn in the mansion, the silence carried something almost palpable, as if the gilded corridors and stained glass windows hid secrets that preferred not to be revealed. Clara walked between the rooms with the lightness of someone accustomed to being invisible, but with a mind always alert, capturing details few noticed. And it was on one of these mornings that something began to change. The millionaire, Mr. Augusto, was not only a ruthless businessman, but also surrounded by enemies who would rather see him ruined than triumphant. The family, once shrouded in apparent stability, hid cracks that grew deeper by the moment. His wife's suspicious gaze, the whispers of business associates who came and went, and even the way some employees glanced at one another, revealed that danger lurked not only outside the mansion's iron gates, but also seeped through the cracks of daily life. Clara, in silence, observed and memorized every little detail, without imagining that she herself would soon become a key part of something much bigger. That afternoon, while discreetly cleaning the millionaire's private meeting room, he found an envelope lying behind the large mahogany desk. It wasn't ordinary paper. It bore the seal of an international bank, and the first lines, which his eager yet fearful eyes dared to read, spoke of suspicious transfers, sums that could never be easily justified. Clara kept this in mind, without touching the envelope, but the seed of doubt had already been planted. What exactly was going on behind this man's luxurious life? Was he just another wealthy man with dark secrets, or was he caught in a web of betrayals that went beyond him? The following days confirmed her intuition. Augusto's behavior oscillated between uncontrolled irritation and an almost suffocating silence. Clara noticed his heavy footsteps echoing in the hallways at night, his constant trips to the office at unlikely hours, and, above all, the almost unhealthy concern he displayed for his young daughters. Safety. This detail deeply affected Clara, for she herself, coming from a background marked by extreme poverty, knew how much a child depended on the protection of those they loved. Seeing that little girl grow up surrounded by luxury, yet at the same time besieged by invisible threats, awakened in Clara an empathy that went beyond her role as a maid. She watched her sleep, arranged her clothes with almost maternal care, and silently hoped that nothing bad would happen to her. Until, one rainy night, the inevitable happened. A metallic clang in the garden, followed by the frantic barking of guard dogs, sent Clara running to the nearest window. She saw two shadows gliding across the wall, swift, almost ghost-like. Her heart raced, and instinctively, without thinking of the consequences, she ran toward the girls' room. Opening the door, she noticed the window was ajar, something impossible to happen by accident. The cold wind blew in, and for a moment, fear froze Clara. But there, in the white wooden crib, the child slept peacefully, oblivious to the approaching chaos. Clara positioned herself beside him, ready for anything, as strange footsteps echoed inside the house. The millionaire was absent, busy on a business trip, and his wife had left hours earlier. leaving a void that made everything even more vulnerable. When the intruders finally tried to force their way into the room, Clara didn't hesitate. She grabbed the heavy crystal lamp from the bedside table and, with a courage she never thought she possessed, faced the men. The fight was quick but intense. She screamed at the top of her lungs, triggering security, who quickly stormed the hallway, but not before Clara struck one of the intruders, who fell stunned to the floor. The other managed to escape, but the message was clear. Someone was out to kidnap the child, someone who knew the house's weak spots, someone who knew the family's routine. Clara, panting, her hands trembling, hugged the girl, feeling a warmth of life in her arms. In that moment, something changed forever. She was no longer just a maid, she was the child's protector. When Augusto hurried back hours later, he found Clara still with red eyes and dust-stained clothes. Security reported the incident, but it was the look in his daughter's eyes, clinging to the maid's neck, that said more than any words. For the first time, the millionaire truly saw her, not as the poor young woman who cleaned the corners of the mansion, but as someone who had risked her life for what he loved most. His silence was unsettling, but there was something different in his eyes, a mixture of gratitude and disbelief. No one had ever made themselves so vulnerable for him or his daughter, and it is precisely at this point that the story takes on an almost unbearable weight, because the millionaire couldn't simply admit he was in debt to a maid. His pride, his public image, and the coldness of his business dealings wouldn't allow it. But at the same time, he knew his daughter's life was now tied to that young woman's fate. With her every breath, with her every gesture, Clara carried the weight of a secret, that of having saved the heiress to the fortune, that of having faced dangers she herself never imagined. And deep down, everyone knew this wouldn't be the last attack. Clara began to live with an internal dilemma. Should she remain silent, continue to be just the invisible maid, or should she use what she knew? The suspicions about Augusto's business dealings, the risks surrounding the family, to change her own destiny. It was a heavy burden, for every decision she made from then on could mean life or death, not only for herself, but for the child who now seemed to trust her more than anyone else. This secret grew like a shadow, silent, but increasingly impossible to ignore. And for those of you who have been following this story thus far, have you ever wondered how far someone would go to protect an innocent life? Would you, in Clara's shoes, have the same courage to face armed invaders without considering the consequences? Or would you be paralyzed by fear? Leave your opinion in the comments, because that's exactly what fuels this narrative, a reflection on impossible choices, on courage that arises when we least expect it. If this story has captivated you so far, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel, because the next events will surprise you even more. What Clara discovers next will not only change her life, but will challenge Augusto's entire power structure. And what will he do when he realizes that the fate of his fortune is directly linked to that young woman he previously ignored? Keep watching, because the unexpected is just beginning. The next dawn brought a strange calm to the mansion, as if the previous night's events had been merely a collective nightmare. But Clara knew otherwise. Every shadow that moved in the hallways, every subtle noise from the gardens, sounded like a warning in her mind. She couldn't sleep, spending the night next to the girl's room, fearing that any carelessness could cost her dearly. The security guards, though reinforced, seemed nervous, and their expressions revealed that even trained men could feel fear in the face of such a calculated threat. When the millionaire appeared in the morning, his impeccable suit couldn't hide the exhaustion in his eyes. He had spent the early hours of the morning in emergency calls and meetings, trying to understand who would dare attack his family. Clara noticed that, although he tried to hide it, there was a tension in every gesture, as if every second he expected more bad news. However, there was something even more disturbing. Augusto's wife didn't seem as shaken as expected. Her eyes didn't show maternal despair, only restrained irritation, as if her daughter's kidnapping had been merely an inconvenience in her social life. Clara watched from afar, unable to comprehend how anyone could react so coldly. The child, on the other hand, clung to her with unshakable trust, refusing even to sleep without sensing the young woman's presence in the room. It was as if, in just a few hours, an invisible bond had been born, yet stronger than any logical explanation. And Augusto saw it. He saw how his daughter ran into Clara's arms, how she smiled at the mere sound of his voice, and it made him uneasy, torn between gratitude and the discomfort of realizing that the family heiress's heart didn't belong solely to him. As the days passed, the internal investigation into the attack began to reveal disturbing signs. There were no signs of a forced entry on the main gates. The security cameras had been mysteriously turned off shortly before the invasion. And most seriously, only someone with inside information could have known the child's detailed routine. Augusto gathered his trusted team, but suspicion was already mounting. Who within the mansion itself would be capable of betraying the family? The millionaire, accustomed to distrusting partners, competitors, and even friends, now had to deal with the idea that the enemy could be just a few steps away. Clara, silently, became increasingly central to this plot, not by choice, but because her courage had drawn all eyes to her. Some employees secretly admired her, others envied her for having earned the child's respect and, in a way, Augusto's attention. And there were those who saw her as a threat, a poor maid who, for some reason, now seemed to have a larger role than she should have. It was during a particularly quiet night that Clara realized this painfully. As she discreetly left to fetch water, she heard two employees whispering behind the kitchen. The words, venomous, were clear. She's taking advantage. She wants to become the mistress of the house. She saved the girl on purpose. It's all a setup. You'll see, soon Augusto will look at her as if she were more than a maid. Clara's blood ran cold, and although she continued on her way as if she had heard nothing, she knew this was only the first of many slanders she would have to endure. With each passing day, the tension grew. Augusto seemed obsessed with finding the culprits, but at the same time, he began to show himself more human to Clara. He called her to talk, asking about her days, about her life before the mansion, and she, wary, answered only the bare minimum, fearing that any detail would be used against her in the future. However, one thing was inevitable. With each conversation, he saw that Clara possessed something those around him lacked: sincerity. Unlike his partners, his own wife, and even many of his employees, Clara had no interest in his fortune. She simply wanted to protect the child. This authenticity disarmed him in ways he would never admit aloud, but the dangers were relentless. One night, an anonymous note was found pinned to the mansion's gate. Letters cut from newspapers spelled out the message, "You can't. Protect everyone forever. The child will be ours." The impact was immediate. Augusto further reinforced security, hired new guards, installed extra cameras, but deep down, he knew he was dealing with someone intelligent, someone who knew his steps. Clara, reading those words, felt a deep anguish, as if she already knew this wasn't just an empty threat. It was a promise. The following days were marked by distrust. Augusto began observing each employee with a clinical eye, analyzing gestures, delays, and exchanged glances. Clara felt the weight of being at the center of this unofficial investigation, for even having proven her loyalty, it was impossible to escape the general distrust, and amidst this chaos, the millionaire's wife seemed increasingly distant, involved in parties and travel, as if trying to deny her own reality. This meant that the responsibility for the child fell increasingly on Clara, something that, although natural to her, was beginning to become unbearable. The height of this tension came when, one afternoon, Clara again found a suspicious envelope in Augusto's office. This time, it wasn't bank papers, but personal letters, direct threats, mentioning intimate details of her daughter's routine. Most disturbing, the sender seemed to know things only someone inside the mansion could: the child's sleep schedule, the music she listened to, even her favorite toy she played with every night. Clara immediately took this to the millionaire, and his reaction was devastating. Augusto, upon reading the words, dropped the glass of whiskey he was holding, something unthinkable for a man of his stature. For the first time, Clara saw the millionaire fragile, with tears held back, struggling not to show weakness. He realized the threat was not just against his fortune, but against the only being who truly gave meaning to his life. Clara, watching that scene, felt something shift inside her. It was no longer just about protecting the girl. It was about confronting forces that wanted to destroy innocent lives. And deep down, something told her that Augusto couldn't face it all alone. He had money, he had power, but he lacked the simple essence of courage that comes when you fight for something you can't buy. Clara knew she was faced with an impossible choice: remain the silent maid or become the invisible guardian of that family, even knowing it could cost her own life. And this is where I ask you, those of you who are following this story, what would you do in Clara's place? Would you accept living in fear, hiding behind your routine, or would you have the courage to face such a dangerous threat head-on? Write in the comments, because this is the main reflection of this part of the story. And if you think you've seen it all, get ready, because what comes next will completely change the course of this plot. Subscribe to the channel, like it, and turn on notifications, because the story is just beginning to reveal its darkest secrets. Morning arrived with a thin mist that seemed to shroud the entire mansion in a shroud of mystery. Clara walked through the still silent corridors, the echo of her footsteps mingling with the distant sound of a breeze rustling the velvet curtains. Something was different that day. It wasn't just the growing tension after the anonymous threats, but a subtle, almost imperceptible premonition that the family's secrets would begin to reveal themselves irrevocably. Every painting hanging on the walls, every antique piece of furniture, seemed to hold stories no one dared tell. Clara felt small before that universe of wealth, power, and conspiracy, but also more alive than ever, because her presence, silent yet firm, was beginning to influence the destinies of everyone there. As the girl played in her room, her eyes still shining with trust in the young woman who had saved her, Clara received an unexpected phone call. It was someone who identified himself only as a loyal family friend, someone who claimed to know details about the previous night's attack. The voice, deep and anxious, mentioned hidden documents, secret diaries, and family secrets that, if exposed, could shake not only Augusto's reputation, but also reveal shocking truths about everyone who lived under that roof. Clara, without hesitation, agreed to meet the person, though her heart raced with a mixture of fear and curiosity. Each step to the agreed location felt like a silent test of courage, and she knew that the life she had before arriving at the mansion would never return. When she met with the mysterious informant, information began to emerge slowly, almost painfully. There were old letters, diaries forgotten in secret vaults, correspondence mentioning betrayals, inheritance disputes, and even dark plots involving blackmail. Clara felt a chill run down her spine. How could someone plan such calculated, cold-blooded actions involving people so close to her? But there was no time for long reflections. The informant handed her photos, records, and details that should have remained confidential, but the responsibility now was hers, to protect the child and, at the same time, decide what to do with this avalanche of information that could destroy lives or reveal the truth. Upon returning to the mansion, Clara noticed subtle changes in Augusto's behavior. He seemed more attentive, more observant, and there was something in his gaze that blended concern with disconcerting curiosity. He began discreetly questioning her about her night out, about what she had seen and heard, but without accusing her directly. Clara knew that any slip-up could put her in a dangerous position, but she also recognized that the millionaire, despite his position of power, needed real allies, people without hidden agendas, and at that moment something began to shift between them. A silent respect, a tacit alliance based on mutual trust, and the urgency to protect the girl from the approaching threats. Tension in the mansion intensified when one of the senior security guards was found in a state of panic, murmuring about seeing shadows moving through the hallways, unknown people peering through large windows at night. Augusto decided to further reinforce security by installing new systems, but fear had already deeply penetrated everyone. Clara, in her strategic silence, began to realize that each employee had something to hide, that every smile could be a mask and every gesture a clue to what was really happening. The young woman's mind worked incessantly, connecting information, identifying patterns, anticipating moves, a dangerous game of strategy and survival. Meanwhile, the girl began asking innocent but insightful questions about recent events. Clara answered carefully, avoiding revealing more than the child could understand, but the sparkle in the little girl's eyes was a constant reminder of the responsibility she bore. Each protective gesture, each silent care, was a display of courage that the millionaire was beginning to recognize and secretly admire. He realized that this poor, simple young woman possessed a strength that no amount of money could buy. The determination to protect without expecting anything in return, the courage to face unseen dangers, and the ability to inspire confidence even in the darkest moments. The following days were a tangle of discoveries. Clara began to notice missing documents, suspicious messages, and hints of subtle lies told by family members. Each clue seemed to lead her to a deeper truth, a web of secrets that went far beyond what anyone could imagine. Augusto, though he tried to maintain his composure, began to reveal himself vulnerable in the face of the magnitude of the secrets that were emerging. He saw Clara differently, no longer as just a servant, but as someone capable of facing the complexity of a world that he himself, with all his wealth, could not fully control. Then, one silent night, Clara discovered the first great secret that would change everything. An ancient safe, hidden behind a bookshelf in Augusto's office, contained evidence of a betrayal no one expected. Letters, contracts, and photos revealed financial manipulation, hidden relationships, and decisions that jeopardized the child's inheritance. Clara felt the weight of that discovery. Every decision she made from then on would have enormous consequences, not only for her, but for everyone in the mansion. This is why tension reached a new level. The family's fate was in some way tied to her silent courage, and so the story progresses, revealing that the real battle was not just against external threats, but against internal secrets that could destroy reputations, hearts, and lives. Clara's every choice, every cautious step, brought her closer to a turning point where courage, intelligence, and intuition would be the only weapons capable of confronting the darkness that lurked behind the facade of wealth. Now imagine yourself in Clara's shoes. Would you be able to keep a cool head when faced with secrets that could shake your entire life and that of an innocent child? Comment below what you would do, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and activate the bell, because the next chapters will reveal even more shocking secrets that will completely transform this story. The sun had barely risen when Clara realized something was wrong. The atmosphere in the mansion was heavy, almost suffocating, as if the very air carried unspoken secrets. The girl, still drowsy, played with her toys in her room, unaware that outside her small world, invisible forces were silently moving. Clara felt every detail: the creaking of doors, the rustling of curtains, the distant whisper of footsteps that shouldn't be there. The tension accumulated over the past few days turned every moment into a high alert. She knew her every move was being watched and that every decision could change destinies irreversibly. As she walked down the main hallway, Clara found Augusto in his library, a worried expression etched on his face. His eyes, normally cold and calculating, now showed signs of vulnerability. He held a yellowed, seemingly ancient letter with a burnt corner and writing that seemed shaky with age. Clara realized immediately that this letter was no ordinary correspondence. It was a fragment of a betrayal that had been carefully hidden for years. Without waiting for permission, she approached, studying every word, every ink mark that indicated haste and desperation. The letter revealed that someone close to the family had manipulated critical events, lied about the custody of documents, and even concealed actions that could jeopardize the girl's fortune and future. Clara felt a chill run down her spine. The complexity of the plot was terrifying, each lie intertwined with another, creating a web of intrigue that seemed impossible to undo. But instead of backing down, Clara felt determination grow within her. She had a responsibility to protect innocence, to ensure the truth came out and justice was served. Augusto, still holding the letter, began questioning Clara in a veiled manner. His questions weren't aggressive, but rather subtle. "Did you notice anything strange last night? Any changes in the staff's habits? Any conversations that didn't make sense?" Clara responded calmly, but each word was measured, calculated not to reveal more than was safe. The tension between them grew, but it also transformed into a quiet partnership where trust began to emerge even amidst the chaos. In the following days, Clara began to discover small clues that confirmed the betrayal. Displaced objects, forged documents, secret phone records. Every detail revealed the extent of the manipulation and deception within the mansion. The staff, many of whom had trusted Augusto completely, began to show signs of nervousness, furtive glances, and hesitant gestures. Clara realized she could no longer trust anyone but herself and the protected girl under her care. Each step became a delicate dance between revealing what she knew and protecting those she loved. While investigating, Clara found a diary hidden in the attic. The pages, filled with scribbles and cryptic notes, detailed illicit actions, secret meetings, and decisions aimed at manipulating the family fortune. She read about shady dealings, blackmail, and even veiled threats to family members who dared question the established hierarchy. Clara's heart pounded. Every word was a reminder that she was dealing with a complex web of secrets and betrayals, where every wrong move could cost not only her safety, but also the girls. The most shocking revelation came when Clara discovered that someone Augusto trusted was directly involved in the conspiracies. The shock was so great that for a moment she almost couldn't breathe. How could someone who seemed loyal, who seemed harmless, be responsible for so much danger and deceit? But Clara had no time for despair. With a sharp mind and firm courage, she began planning how she could confront this person, how she could expose the truth safely and strategically, ensuring justice was served without putting anyone at unnecessary risk. Meanwhile, Augusto began to realize the full extent of the betrayal. The millionaire, accustomed to controlling everything around him, felt vulnerable in a way he had never experienced before. He needed reliable allies, and Clara, with her intelligence and determination, became indispensable. The two began to strategize, carefully discussing every detail, weighing risks, and anticipating responses. Every decision was crucial, and the tension increased with each discovery. The girl, still oblivious to the complexity of what was happening, began to notice subtle changes in Clara's behavior. There was more care, more attention to detail, more confidence in every gesture. The trust between them grew, and Clara knew that protecting the child's innocence was her greatest duty. Each small smile from the girl became fuel for the courage she needed to maintain in the face of the invisible threats that loomed at every turn. So, one silent night, Clara decided to confront the person who had betrayed the family's trust. Preparation was meticulous. She studied every behavior, every routine, and anticipated every possible reaction. Tensions were running high. The confrontation wouldn't be merely physical or verbal, but strategic and psychological. A battle of wits and courage. Every movement, every word, every look had to be calculated to ensure the truth emerged without causing irreparable damage. At the moment of confrontation, Clara realized something surprising. The traitor hadn't expected to be confronted so soon, and the shock in his eyes reflected both fear and silent admiration. Clara used every scrap of information she had gathered, every piece of evidence, every piece of proof to dismantle the lies and expose the hidden plot. The atmosphere was tense, each breath felt like a ton. The battle for truth wasn't just about justice, but about showing that courage and integrity could overcome manipulation and deceit. In the end, the truth began to emerge, but much remained to be revealed. Clara knew that each partial victory was just a step toward complete revelation, and that the story was far from over. The tension in the mansion was rising, secrets were becoming clear, and the responsibility Clara bore became even more crucial. Each future decision would define the fate of everyone there, and the courage of the poor young woman who saved the child would continue to be the guiding thread of this story, full of mystery, drama, and surprising revelations. Now, imagine yourself in Clara's shoes. Would you have the courage to confront someone so close to you and reveal life-changing secrets? Comment below with your ideas and strategies. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and activate the notification bell so you don't miss the next chapters of this shocking story that blends courage, mystery, and family drama. As the first rays of sunlight filtered through the mansion's immense windows, Clara felt the weight of the previous night's revelations pressing down on her. The hidden betrayal had shaken the family's foundations, and she knew the coming days would require her utmost vigilance. Every hallway, every room, every shadow seemed to whisper secrets, reminding her that nothing in this house was as it seemed. The ostentatious luxury hid a darkness that Clara was only beginning to comprehend. Augusto, the billionaire patriarch, now confronted with the betrayal that had quietly spread among his trusted aides, had become a transformed man. The rigid control he had once exerted with ease began to crumble under the weight of distrust, uncertainty, and the realization that his world was not as safe as he had believed. Clara watched him closely, understanding that any slip-up could undo the fragile strategy of restoring order and protecting the innocent. Yet amid the tension there was a glimmer of hope, the understanding that together they could bring the truth to light. Clara's attention turned to the mansion's staff, whose behavior had become increasingly erratic in recent days. Subtle glances, whispered conversations that abruptly cut off when she approached, and a sense of unease that seemed to permeate the walls. She realized the betrayal was not an isolated act. It had roots, allies hidden in plain sight, waiting for the right moment to act. The realization was terrifying. She could trust almost no one. Yet this realization strengthened her resolve. Clara's sense of duty to protect the child and expose the powerful family's secrets became an unshakable force, guiding every careful step she took through the mansion's labyrinthine corridors. One afternoon, Clara discovered a small, discreet envelope hidden behind a stack of dusty books in the Maid library. Its contents were simple yet explosive: detailed notes on secret meetings, financial manipulations, and a coded list of accomplices within the house. Each name and observation revealed the complex web of power, influence, and greed. Clara's heart raced as she connected the dots, realizing the betrayal was far more extensive than anyone could have imagined. Each revelation was like a piece of a puzzle that, once assembled, could have catastrophic consequences if handled incorrectly. Over the next few days, Clara carefully monitored the movements of those involved, mentally recording details, noting inconsistencies in their stories, and learning the rhythm of their deceptions. She moved like a shadow, blending into her surroundings as she observed patterns waiting for the perfect moment to strike. It became clear that the key to dismantling the network of betrayal would require subtlety, intelligence, and courage. Every interaction, every question she asked, was calculated to elicit answers that revealed hidden truths without betraying her own intentions. Meanwhile, Augusto faced his own internal struggle. His pride and sense of authority clashed with the vulnerability imposed by betrayal. He was accustomed to wielding power with ease, but the invisible enemy within his own household reminded him that even the wealthy and influential are not immune to deception. It was in this environment that a tenuous alliance began to form between Clara and Augusto, a bond born not of friendship, but of necessity, mutual respect, and the shared goal of exposing those who would harm the innocent. Clara also began to notice changes in the child, Isabel. The young woman, perceptive beyond her years, had begun to sense the tension in the air. Though she still smiled and played, her curiosity often led her to corners of the mansion where she overheard fragments of conversations she shouldn't have heard. Clara took it upon herself to shield Isabel from these discoveries, creating small distractions and gently redirecting the child's attention away from danger. The emotional weight of this responsibility added another layer of tension, as every act of protection carried the risk of exposure. One night, Clara discovered a clandestine meeting that had been meticulously hidden from the family. In the dim candlelight, she saw several employees exchanging documents, whispering about financial irregularities, and strategizing to secure their positions in the household. Hierarchy. Clara's heart raced. The situation had escalated dramatically. She knew that if this conspiracy remained unchecked, it could permanently compromise the safety and future of both the family and the child. A plan was needed, a precise strategy that would unravel their schemes without provoking defensive retaliation. Amid this tense atmosphere, Clara also discovered that some allies existed, individuals within the house who, though cautious, were willing to offer subtle assistance. These hidden allies provided nuggets of critical information, clues to suspicious behavior, and warnings of potential traps. Clara's challenge was to weave these threads together, forming a coherent understanding of the conspiracy without revealing her own intentions. The mansion had become a chessboard, and she needed to anticipate moves several steps ahead, always aware that a single mistake could be disastrous. Clara's nights became restless, filled with strategizing, rehearsing conversations, and mentally cataloging possible outcomes. The mansion, once a place of tranquil luxury, now felt like a battlefield, its ornate rooms concealing shadows of deceit and danger. She knew the final confrontation would require not only courage, but precise execution. Clara sensed the conspirators growing bolder, their actions more reckless as they sought to consolidate power and protect their secrets. As the plot thickened, Clara realized that a single moment of clarity could change everything. One conversation, one revelation, one carefully timed exposure could topple the web of betrayal and restore balance. She meticulously prepared the evidence, memorized conversations, and created a mental timeline of events. Every detail mattered. Every subtle clue could be the difference between success and failure. The responsibility was immense, but Clara's determination was unwavering. Finally, the moment of confrontation approached. Clara, armed with irrefutable evidence and strategic vision, prepared to reveal the hidden alliances, expose the conspirators, and protect Isabel. The tension was palpable, the stakes higher than ever. The mansion, a symbol of wealth and opulence, had become a stage where courage, intelligence, and morality would collide with deceit, ambition, and greed. Clara's actions would determine not only the fate of a family, but the course of justice. As the day of revelation approached, the mansion seemed to hold its breath. Every shadow, every whisper, every movement carried meaning. Clear, firm, and resolute, she understood the gravity of the moment. The truth was about to emerge, and with it, the consequences that would reverberate throughout the house. The story of courage, deceit, and revelation reached its climax, and the outcome remained uncertain, hanging on the sharp edge between triumph and catastrophe. Get involved. How would you react if you discovered hidden alliances threatening those you care for? Could you navigate a web of deception to protect the innocent? Comment below with your strategies and predictions, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and activate the bell to stay tuned for shocking revelations in the next chapters of this story. The day dawned with a deceptive calm. The mansion, imposing and silent, hid beneath its facade of luxury and order, a whirlwind of tension that grew with each passing hour. Clara knew that to dismantle the web of secrets and betrayals surrounding Isabel, she needed to act with surgical precision. Every wrong move could put not only the child, but the entire family in danger. The game of truth was about to begin, and she needed to master its rules before it was too late. As she walked through the silent corridors, Clara mentally reviewed everything she had discovered: hidden alliances, financial manipulations, veiled threats, and the suspicious behavior of employees who, until then, had seemed harmless. Every detail needed to be remembered, every gesture recorded. She understood that the truth, when revealed at the right time, could disarm enemies and solidify allies. But if disclosed hastily, it could cause irreversible chaos. Augusto, the billionaire patriarch, was now beginning to realize the full extent of the betrayal hidden beneath the glitter of his fortune. The power and control that had once dominated his life became fragile in the face of the dark reality that was emerging. He saw Clara not simply as the child's caretaker, but as a vital player in the delicate battle for the truth. There was a quiet respect between them, an understanding that, though separated by status and wealth, they shared the same goal: to protect Isabel and expose those who conspired against the family. During a secret strategy meeting, Clara analyzed the conspirators, observing every expression, every hesitation, every micro-gesture that might betray hidden intentions. It was a psychological game of patience and perception. She knew she needed to extract vital information without arousing suspicion. Every question asked, every casual comment, every seemingly trivial interaction had a purpose: to unravel layers of deception without revealing her own agenda. Isabel, with her childlike perceptiveness, was already beginning to notice patterns and inconsistencies, even without fully understanding adult complexities. Clara, sensing the girl's growing curiosity, implemented small distractions, transforming everyday tasks into opportunities to divert the child's attention from dangerous conversations. The emotional tension mounted. Protecting Isabel while gathering evidence and planning the exposure of the traitors was a delicate dance, requiring balance and nerves of steel. Clara also began to identify hidden allies, household staff who, though cautious, offered subtle clues and valuable information. These allies provided fragments of hidden truths, allowing Clara to connect the dots of a web of betrayal that threatened to expand with each passing day. The mansion, once a symbol of security and wealth, became a minefield of secrets where every step needed to be carefully calculated. The truth game reached its climax when Clara discovered compromising documents proving financial manipulation and emotional blackmail within the family. Every paper, every note, every detail revealed the lengths the conspirators were willing to go to protect their interests. The magnitude of the betrayal was greater than Clara could have imagined, and the risk of personal exposure increased with each discovery. As tensions grew, Augusto began to collaborate more directly, sharing observations and experiences from years of working with employees and family members. Together, he and Clara began to devise strategies to confront the conspirators, plan the disclosure of the evidence, and protect Isabel from any negative repercussions. Every decision was weighted, every step carefully calculated, and the pressure to not fail was almost tangible. The nights became long and sleepless. Clara mentally reviewed every detail, rehearsing conversations, anticipating reactions, and developing possible scenarios for every eventuality. The mansion seemed to breathe with the growing tension, and every shadow, every noise reminded Clara that she was dealing with people capable of any action to keep their secrets hidden. The game required concentration, courage, and psychological skill, and she had to rise to the occasion. Finally, the decisive moment approached. Clara had gathered enough evidence to expose the conspirators and ensure Isabel's safety. Every move, every word, every action would be crucial to success. The truth game wasn't just about revealing secrets, it was about protecting the innocent, restoring justice, and ensuring that truth prevailed over greed, fear, and manipulation. The plan was set: confront the traitors, reveal documents and testimonies, and keep Isabel safe. Tensions reached fever pitch as Clara prepared to act. The mansion, silent and imposing, became the stage for the final confrontation between courage, intelligence, and morality versus deceit, ambition, and betrayal. Every second counted, every detail mattered, and Clara's determination was unwavering. Get involved. If you were in Clara's shoes, how would you handle such a complex game of manipulation? Could you protect the innocent while exposing the truth? Comment below with your strategies and predictions, like the video, and subscribe too. Follow the next chapters of this thrilling story. The mansion was plunged into a tense silence, broken only by the soft creak of the wooden floor beneath Clara's careful footsteps. She knew every second counted. Every movement needed to be calculated precisely, for any hint of hesitation could be fatal. The truth was about to be confronted, but not explosively. The power of revelation lay in the subtlety, the silent shock that would disarm the conspirators irrevocably. As she made her way through the corridors, Clara mentally reviewed every detail of the conspiracy, the hidden financial secrets, the carefully woven emotional lies, and the small acts of betrayal that, until that moment, had seemed insignificant. Each piece of information was a weapon, each observation a step toward the final exposure. She realized that the confrontation was not only about justice, but also about strategy, intelligence, and courage. Augusto, the family patriarch, now stood beside Clara, sharing valuable insights. He knew the weaknesses and behavioral patterns of each family member, knew when a hesitation indicated guilt, when a smile hid manipulation, and when silence spoke louder than any words. Together, they formed a silent and relentless team, ready to disarm traitors without resorting to violence, trusting only in the power of truth. Clara studied every detail of the room, the soft lighting that cast strategic shadows, the furniture that could conceal discreet movements, and even the tense air that seemed to amplify every heartbeat. Everything would be used to her advantage. Each conspirator, believing they held control, was about to discover that true strength lay in careful observation and calculated patience. The first target of the silent confrontation was Henrietta, the eldest sister in the family, whose ambition and jealousy had been the initial spark for many of the betrayals. Clara knew she couldn't accuse her directly. That would only provoke an immediate defensive reaction. Instead, she used indirect questions, casual comments, and seemingly innocent observations to coerce Henrietta into revealing unintended information, each gesture, each inadvertent word, a step closer to the truth. Meanwhile, Isabel, now more perceptive and confident, watched with curious and attentive eyes. Clara, recognizing the girl's precocious intelligence, engaged her in small tasks that seemed routine, but served to distract her from delicate conversations. It was a delicate balance, keeping the child's innocence intact while navigating the treacherous waters of a family full of secrets. Throughout the day, Clara silently confronted other conspirators, each in their own space, at separate times, always calculating reactions and gathering evidence. She became a master of timing, waiting for the exact moment when each individual was vulnerable, emotionally disarmed, or unconsciously revealing their lies. Each encounter was like a chess piece, designed to capture the truth without generating direct confrontation. The climax of the silent confrontation came when Clara finally gathered all the conspirators in a common space, under the guise of a routine family meeting. The tension was palpable. The family members sensed something was about to happen, but had no idea how they would be disarmed. Clara maintained a calm and assured demeanor, every gesture controlled, every look intentional. The force of her presence was already beginning to unsettle those who had built their security on lies and manipulation. Clara began revealing details gradually and strategically, without making direct accusations. Small facts, observations, and questions put the conspirators on the defensive, exposing inconsistencies and contradictions in their stories. With each new revelation, the tension increased, and the atmosphere seemed heavier, charged with suspense. Clara's emotional intelligence and her ability to conduct the confrontations silently and precisely were her greatest weapons. The emotional impact on Isabel was profound. The girl, though protected and guided by Clara, grasped the gravity of the revelations, the intensity of the adult expressions, and the magnitude of the unfolding conflict. For her, every gesture, every look, every sigh told a story, teaching her lessons of courage, resilience, and justice. Isabel not only witnessed the revelation of the truth, but also absorbed Clara's strength and determination, learning the importance of facing challenges with intelligence and courage. As the conspirators were disarmed one by one, the atmosphere in the mansion slowly shifted. Fear, manipulation, and arrogance began to give way to the realization that the truth could no longer be denied. Clara had transformed the confrontation into a spectacle of patience, strategy, and insight, proving that the power of truth was greater than any power or wealth. The silent confrontation was not just a strategic victory. It was a lesson in morality and justice. Each conspirator, confronted with the reality of their actions, began to reflect on the consequences of their choices, and the mansion, once a site of intrigue and secrets, slowly became a space of re-evaluation, understanding, and, for some, genuine regret. Get involved. If you were in Clara's position, would you be able to handle such a delicate confrontation without losing your emotional control? How would you expose secrets and protect the innocent at the same time? Comment below. With your ideas, share this video with friends who love stories of mystery and justice, and don't forget to subscribe to follow the next chapters of this thrilling narrative. The mansion remained enveloped in an almost unreal stillness. The air was thick with tension, and every sound, the distant creak of a door, the whisper of a footstep in the hallway, the tinkle of a crystal object, seemed to amplify the suspense. Clara advanced slowly, each movement measured, each breath calculated, aware that this moment would change the lives of everyone present. She held within her not only the truth, but the transformative power it held. This was the moment when the darkest secrets would be exposed, and no one could escape the approaching emotional and psychological impact. Clara's heart was beating fast, but not from fear, from anticipation. She knew that the moment of revelation required precision, courage, and above all, emotional control. It wasn't just about revealing what had been hidden. It was about doing so in a way that each conspirator understood the magnitude of their actions, while Isabel, protected and curious, learned the value of truth and courage. Clara mentally reviewed every detail of what she had uncovered: the silent manipulations, the treacherous acts, the small gestures of selfishness that combined formed a web of secrets that could destroy the family if not revealed carefully. She began with small revelations, carefully observing each family member's reactions. A slight frown, a shifting glance, a sudden pause in speech, all indicated that the truth was beginning to penetrate the layers of denial and arrogance each conspirator maintained. Clara realized that the power of her revelations lay not in their aggressiveness, but in the surgical precision with which each detail was presented, allowing each individual to come to the conclusion of their own guilt without the need for explosive confrontations. The first target of the revelation was Augusto, the family patriarch. Although he was directly responsible for maintaining control over the others, his years of manipulation had not prepared him to face the truth head-on. Clara calmly revealed details of secret financial arrangements, hidden documents, and decisions made to benefit herself and to the detriment of other family members. Augusto's expression gradually changed, from skepticism to disbelief, until finally becoming a mixture of suppressed anger and quiet recognition that he was being discovered. Henrietta, the eldest sister, watched the scene with wide eyes, feeling the tension rise as each secret about her own manipulations was revealed. Clara didn't need to accuse her directly. The mere mention of events and decisions that had been influenced by her ambition was enough to make her shudder. Every gesture, every word, every hesitation demonstrated that the truth was slowly dismantling the wall of lies she had built for years. As Clara led the revelation, Isabel remained by her side, absorbing every nuance, every expression, every meaningful silence. The girl wasn't just seeing secrets exposed, she was witnessing a morality lesson in real time, learning about courage, justice, and resilience. Clara allowed Isabel to observe closely, without letting her become overwhelmed, balancing the emotional intensity of the moment with the need to protect the child's innocence. The climax of the revelation came when Clara exposed the secret that had motivated all the others, the silent and corrupt pact between family members to conceal acts of cruelty, financial and emotional manipulation, and decisions that threatened to destroy not only the family's wealth, but also the moral integrity of everyone involved. Each detail was presented sequentially, each fact supporting the next, until the magnitude of the scandal became impossible to ignore. The emotional impact was immediate. Some conspirators tried to justify themselves, others remained silent, unable to process the enormity of what was being revealed. Clara remained calm, letting the truth speak for itself, allowing every human reaction, fear, regret, anger, or shame, to manifest naturally. The tension reached almost unbearable levels, but Clara knew she needed to conduct each step patiently to ensure the revelation had maximum effect. Isabel, noticing the transformation in the adults around her, felt a mixture of fear and admiration. Clara's every gesture conveyed a powerful message. Truth has its own strength, and courage is not the absence of fear, but the ability to act despite it. The girl was beginning to understand that justice is not just legal, but moral, emotional, and strategic. Each reaction of the conspirators was a living example of what Clara had taught, that choices have consequences, and that hiding the truth only prolongs suffering. The tension didn't ease, even as the deepest secrets were exposed. Clara used silent storytelling techniques, asking indirect questions, encouraging confessions, and observing every nuance of behavior. Each answer was a new piece of the puzzle, each silence charged with meaning. The revelation was working, the truth was penetrating, and the facade of power and control was being dismantled piece by piece. The family members, confronted with concrete evidence, began to recognize their own failings and misguided decisions. Some experienced genuine remorse, others anger and frustration at being discovered, but all, in some way, were impacted by the clarity and power of Clara's narrative. The mansion, previously a stage for manipulation and silence, was transformed into a place of revelation, introspection, and understanding of the magnitude of human actions. At the end of the revealing session, Clara looked around the room and felt a wave of relief and quiet satisfaction. Not only had she exposed the truth, but she had done so strategically, ethically, and emotionally powerfully. Each conspirator now knew they could no longer hide their actions, and Isabel, watching intently, absorbed the lesson of courage, truth, and resilience. Clara then approached Isabel, smiling softly, conveying security and trust. The girl understood that exposing secrets wasn't just about punishing the guilty, but also about restoring balance, teaching valuable lessons, and protecting the innocent. Every gesture, every word, every look was charged with emotional meaning, reinforcing the importance of truth and justice in any circumstance. And so the revelation of the secret became a decisive milestone in the family's life, a turning point that would change the future of everyone involved. Clara's courage, emotional intelligence, and ability to strategically convey the truth became an example of resilience, moral strength, and the power of silent justice. Isabel, now more aware and mature, learned that the truth, however painful, always prevails when guided by courage and wisdom. Get involved. What would you do if you were in Clara's position, given the opportunity to expose dangerous secrets without causing chaos? Could you remain calm and strategic like she did? Comment below with your ideas. Share this video with friends who love intense stories of mystery and justice, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next chapters of this thrilling, twist-filled narrative. The silence that fell over the mansion after the billionaire's secret was revealed wasn't just an absence of sound. It was a tense pause, as if the very air itself were waiting to witness the next reaction of every person present. Clara felt every glance cast in her direction, every held breath, every heavy heartbeat. She knew that her action, though necessary, had unleashed a wave of consequences that were now beginning to ripple in all directions, affecting not only family members, but also employees, neighbors, and even business partners who depended on the empire built on so many secrets. Isabel, still holding Clara's hand, looked around with wide eyes, absorbing every nuance of the family's reaction. To the child, the world seemed at once larger and more frightening, but also more transparent. She finally understood that courage and truth could challenge structures that seemed invincible. Clara looked at Isabel and felt a mixture of pride and responsibility. That moment marked not only the defeat of secrecy, but also the seed of a profound transformation that would affect everyone around her. The Patriarch Augustus stood still, his shoulders tense, his face rigid as stone, but there was a discernible crack in his posture of absolute authority. He knew deep down that his power over the family narrative had been irreparably shaken. Every exposed document, every piece of evidence of manipulation, every act revealed made it impossible to maintain the facade of perfection he had carefully cultivated for decades. It wasn't just the public shame that weighed heavily on him, it was the dawning awareness of how his own greed and secrets had harmed innocent people, including Clara and Isabel. Henrietta, the eldest sister, felt the weight of guilt concretely for the first time. She didn't react with shouts or accusations, but the deep introspection that gripped her thoughts was intense and silent. Every memory of betrayal, every decision made out of personal ambition, every fake smile in moments of pain now emerged with brutal clarity. Henrietta realized that true transformation didn't come from loud confrontations, but from accepting one's own responsibility. Clara realized this was a unique opportunity to plant a seed of change that, if nurtured carefully, could blossom into genuine repentance and transformative behavior. Other family members reacted differently, some with denial, others with attempts to minimize the gravity of the events. The transformation would not be uniform, and Clara knew she needed to observe each reaction with strategic patience. Some members tried to deflect attention, others sought to justify their actions, and some even tried to blame others. But the truth, now clear and documented, could no longer be ignored. Every attempt at manipulation or deception would be easily unmasked, because Clara had established a new standard of ethical vigilance within the mansion. Meanwhile, the dynamics among the staff also began to shift. Those who had witnessed silent injustices were emboldened by Clara's courage. Small gestures of solidarity began to appear. Whispers of support and admiration for the housekeeper's actions circulated through the halls. Clara watched closely, understanding that true change began with example and moral leadership. Her courage not only exposed the secret, but also inspired a ripple effect of integrity and courage in everyone around her. Isabel, in turn, began to notice small changes within herself. She understood that justice and truth were not abstract concepts, but living forces capable of altering destinies. Her relationship with Clara strengthened, not only as a caregiver and protégé, but also as a mentor and inspiration. The trust between them grew, becoming an emotional pillar that would sustain Isabel as she faced her family's future challenges. Every conversation, every gesture of support, every shared hug carried a lesson in resilience, courage, and honesty, making the process of transformation even more profound. The effects also began to manifest themselves in the family's business and reputation. Business partners, investors, and advisors began to question past decisions, contracts, and partnerships that had previously been accepted without question. The transparency forced by Clara's actions sparked a wave of strategic reassessments. Some family members realized their credibility was at stake, and that only through corrective action and demonstrations of integrity could they rebuild lost trust. Every phone call, meeting, and negotiation became a test of the new reality. No longer based on secrecy and manipulation, but on transparency and accountability. Meanwhile, Clara was also grappling with her own complex emotions. There was relief, yes, but also a growing weight of responsibility. She knew that every consequence that arose would be partly attributable to her actions, and that she needed to be prepared to face criticism, resistance, and even hostility. But she also knew that no meaningful transformation would occur without courage. Clara took a deep breath, feeling the impact of her role in the family narrative and realizing that her fate was now inextricably linked to that of the lives she had helped protect. As the days passed, small changes began to solidify into habits and behavioral patterns. The family learned slowly and painfully that truth brings freedom but also demands responsibility. Difficult conversations began to occur more frequently, regrets were expressed, and attempts at reparations began to materialize. Clara observed everything carefully, adjusting her actions and words to ensure that the transformation process did not regress, that the lessons learned were incorporated, and that emotional and moral justice was consolidated. In the end, the transformation wasn't just about righting past wrongs, but about creating a different future. Isabel learned the importance of courage and integrity. Family members learned that secrets and manipulation can destroy relationships and trust, and Clara solidified her role, not only as a housekeeper, but as a catalyst for change and an example of resilience. The mansion, once marked by shadows of fear and control, began to reflect light, not just physically, but symbolically, radiating hope, justice, and the possibility of redemption. And so, as the sun set over the estate, Clara looked at Isabel, the mansion's hallways, and her family members, feeling a wave of quiet realization. She knew there were still challenges, that the transformation wasn't linear, but she also knew that nothing would ever be the same again. Every gesture, every future decision would be influenced by this experience, and the most important lesson, that truth and courage can overcome any obstacle, would remain forever as her legacy. The story didn't end with a simple act of revelation. It continued to unfold with consequences, decisions, and opportunities for redemption. Clara, with her unwavering sense of justice and humanity, had changed not only Isabel's fate, but the fate of everyone connected to that dark secret. And as the gentle wind blew through the mansion's gardens, certainty hung in the air. True transformation, though painful, had begun. The day began with an almost palpable tension in the mansion, as if every room, every hallway, every object carried with it the weight of everything that had been revealed. Clara knew this would be the decisive moment, the instant when the impact of her actions would finally find a concrete response, and the transformation that had begun in the family's hearts would be definitively tested. As she walked the hallways, she observed the looks, postures, and micro-expressions of each family member, realizing that each one was silently struggling with their own emotions: shame, fear, regret, and for some, disbelief. Isabel stood beside her, gripping her hand tightly. There was a mixture of nervousness and determination in the child's eyes, a newfound confidence in those who dared to protect the truth. She knew Clara had faced not only direct opposition from her family, but also the ghosts of a past many preferred to ignore. And now, in this moment of maximum tension, the little girl understood that courage is not measured by the size of the adversary, but by the strength of conviction that remains even in the face of the most relentless adversity. Patriarch Augustus entered the main living room, his face still marked by rigidity and wounded pride, but with a slight opening of introspection. Each step he took was measured, aware that recent events had broken barriers he had never imagined breaking. He knew his authority had been publicly questioned, and that more than ever, his decisions would be watched under the watchful eye of truth. Augustus took a deep breath, feeling the weight of decades of secrecy and manipulation slowly dissipate, replaced by a new, uncertain, but potentially liberating sensation. Henrietta, still absorbed in thoughts of her own responsibility, finally broke the silence. With a simple but powerful gesture, she approached Clara and Isabel, offering a look that blended regret, gratitude, and hope. It was a silent moment, but charged with meaning. Clara immediately understood that this was not simply an acknowledgement of guilt, but a genuine step toward redemption. This small gesture symbolized the possibility of reconciliation, of rebuilding family relationships, and of profoundly transforming patterns that had caused so much suffering. As the staff watched, the atmosphere began to shift noticeably. The mansion, once charged with tension and secrecy, began to breathe a new kind of energy, the energy of transparency, courage, and justice. Small whispers of support and expressions of relief emerged among those who had witnessed silent injustices and now saw that the truth was finally being acknowledged. Clara realized that the change came not only from confrontations and revelations, but from the quiet impact her act of courage had had on everyone present. The critical moment arrived when Augusto stood before everyone, his voice carrying a mixture of authority, vulnerability, and determination. He publicly acknowledged the mistakes of the past, admitting that manipulation, control, and secrets had harmed innocent people, including Clara and Isabel. Each word was carefully chosen, reflecting the complexity of his position. Still powerful, but now aware of the consequences of his actions. The atmosphere shifted instantly, and a reverent silence filled the room, allowing each person to absorb the magnitude of the moment. Isabel, holding Clara's hand, felt a mixture of relief and empowerment. For the first time, it wasn't just about surviving the circumstances, but about understanding that truth and courage could forever change the course of their lives. She looked around and realized that those who had previously seemed insurmountable were now exposed in their human vulnerability. Every gesture, every expression, every word spoken in that moment carried with it a powerful lesson about responsibility, courage, and redemption. Meanwhile, Clara reflected on the journey she had traveled. She remembered the silent nights where she had carefully planned each step, the difficult decisions that had put her at risk, the times she had to confront not only her family but also her own fears and doubts. Each obstacle overcome made her stronger, more prepared to face the challenges that still lay ahead. She understood that her role was not limited to protecting Isabel or exposing the secret. It was about creating a legacy of integrity and resilience that would reverberate beyond the mansion walls. The reaction from the media and the wider community began almost immediately. The story of the humble governess who dared to defy power and protect an innocent child quickly spread, capturing the attention of journalists, family behavior experts, and the general public. Clara observed cautiously, aware that visibility could bring both support and criticism, but also recognizing that every word spread reinforced the importance of truth, courage, and justice. The narrative became a symbol, a warning to powerful families, officials, and society about the transformative power of ethics and humanity. Inside the mansion, family dynamics began to significantly recalibrate. Honest conversations, previously impossible, began to take place. Regrets were expressed, apologies were offered, and gradually, small acts of reparation began to take shape. Clara observed each step with strategic attention, ensuring that lessons learned were incorporated and that the process of change was not superficial, but deep and lasting. Each gesture of responsibility, each decision made with ethical awareness, represented a silent but crucial victory in building a more just future. Isabel, sitting beside Clara in a moment of tranquility, reflected on everything she had witnessed. She understood that courage and integrity are not just desirable qualities, but transformative forces capable of altering destinies. Clara's every action, every ethical decision, and every challenge she faced became a living example of resilience and determination. The child began to understand that, even amidst power and wealth, true strength lies in the ability to do what is right, even when it is difficult and risky. Clara, for her part, felt a profound sense of mission accomplished. She knew the journey wasn't over yet, that the effects of her actions would continue to unfold, but she also recognized that she had laid the foundation for lasting transformation. The legacy she had created wasn't limited to Isabel or the Billionaire family. It extended to all who would witness her courage and learn that truth, justice, and integrity are forces capable of changing the course of human life. The day ended with a silent yet meaningful scene. Clara and Isabel walked through the mansion's corridors, now illuminated by soft, natural light, feeling that, although the road ahead was still long, a new era had begun. Every lingering shadow was now a reminder of obstacles overcome. Every room held memories of conflicts transformed into learning, and every look exchanged between Clara and Isabel represented hope, trust, and the power of unwavering courage. And so, the story of the humble governess who saved the billionaire's child reached its climax, not only as a tale of heroism, but as a lasting lesson in ethics, justice, and transformation. Clara had shown the world that courage and truth can defy any power, that integrity can alter destinies, and that human resilience can transform even the darkest secrets into opportunities for redemption. As the sun set and the last rays illuminated the mansion, there was a clear and definitive sense of closure, but also of continuity. The story didn't end with a simple act of exposition. It continued to reverberate, touching hearts, inspiring action, and creating a legacy that would extend far beyond the mansion itself. And in the end, Clara knew that her courage had done more than protect a child. It had changed the world around her, demonstrating that even in the presence of absolute power, truth and justice always find a way.